Welcome to Living the Reclaim Life podcast. I'm Denisha. We're glad you're here for conversations that revive hope, inspire healing, and encourage you to live a vibrant life with Christ. So grab a cup of coffee as we chat with today's guest. And you are about to meet a passionate woman who loves deeply and enjoys life completely. And you know, when we hear that she enjoys life completely and loves deeply, you would think, oh, she's probably had an easy life. But that's not the case for Christine. But the one thing that has always been consistent is that her faith has always been so strong. And today you're going to not only meet Christine, but hear Christine's story. And I know that you will be so encouraged and filled with hope. So Christine, we're so excited to have you.
Good morning. This is a reversal for sure.
Isn't it? Oh, I think it was a little less than a year ago.
It was.
Yeah.
But you were my guest. I love that. We actually are, I'm returning the favor.
And Christine, I've told you this in private, but you were the very first podcast that I ever was on. And I was so nervous, and you were so amazing and so gracious and made me feel so comfortable as I shared my story of being an abortion survivor on your podcast, Stories of Hope.
You know, I am glad that I could make you feel comfortable because I want people to feel comfortable, but I also want them to share their story. And your story, I learned through someone else who did a presentation at a networking group that I was at. And I was like, wait a minute, there's such a thing as a abortion survivor. I was like, I got to know more about this. And that's a sensitive, very sensitive topic, as you and I both know. So I want to say once again, thank you for being my guest, new, first time or not. You educated me and you educated anyone who was listening to your story. So thank you again.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And now here we are. You were one of my biggest cheerleaders to start this podcast.
Yes.
And I appreciate you pioneering and trailblazing the way for us to work together again. And now here we are with a podcast. So I'm excited to have you on. And you are doing so many amazing things. I watch you on Facebook. Y'all got to follow Christine on Facebook. We'll put her link to Facebook in the show notes. It is just amazing, the different things that you're involved in. Tell us of some of the neat things that you've had the opportunity to do, even during COVID.
You know, interesting enough, we know social media is whatever you want to interpret it, right? It's your perception of where you are in your life. And so if you look at social media and you live vicariously, which I have a lot of those, going, okay, it's almost like, where's Waldo? It's where's Christine now? I've got so many people thinking that I live somewhere else that I don't live in. And that's the best part. I don't live my life on the clock of other people. I don't live my life on the race of other people's lives. I have my own race because we all have an expiration date, right? Mm-hmm. So when you ask me what I do in the community, what am I not wanting to do is, I guess, the question. I'm always wanting to make a difference just because of the way I was raised, where there wasn't a lot of things available to me. And there were people that I don't know and will never know that were there for my mom when we were younger as her being a single parent. So whatever I can do to help other people. So that includes even neighborhood cleanups in the city of Chandler, here in Chandler, Arizona. There are so many wonderful things that Chandler has going on that they're keeping and building community. And in the 2020 year, yes, that was a struggle for everybody. But I still found a way to probably won't admit this. I wasn't supposed to be in certain places. But, you know, to go see a tree somewhere or to go and just take in the peace and the beauty that God created for us to see and not to take advantage of or take and abuse. How about that? A lot of people don't realize the different things that we've been given each day once we wake up and our eyes are open. And I want to say that just because we can see, not everyone else can see, but we still have life within us. So to answer your question, I do whatever I can. And so I can't specifically say what, but if it brings joy to other people by living vicariously on going on a hike with me where I fell in the Fossil Creek falls 2 weeks ago, people were like, oh, that looks so fun. I said, yeah, but you didn't see I fell in. Or it's out there helping clean up a neighborhood by raking rocks or picking up trash or being helpful to someone who is a personal friend who lost a loved one, where you see those in memories of on the highway well, there's a cleanup crew, and that is typically the person who's sponsoring that sign. So I've seen trash that I was like, ew. So again, it's wherever I can help.
That's pretty awesome. And you also have a nonprofit called Remember Me Always. Tell us a little bit about that.
I do. And I know you'll ask me in a little while about my journey as to why
Yeah.
I am where I'm at. So my nonprofit is called Remember Me Always, as you had mentioned, and it was based on my personal journey. And that is the loss of my 17-year-old daughter, Nicole Marie. Remember Me Always provides in the moment necessities when putting a loved one to rest, such as assistance with an urn, a headstone, a plaque, a wake, maybe some flowers. The keepsakes, you'll know some people will have their loved ones cremated, so they'll have jewelry that have a little bit of their ashes in there. I've been honored to be able to do those types of things because I know how important it is. Because once that day is done, where all of everyone that comes to you and excuse me wants to give their condolences or be your support, they all go away.
Yeah.
And then you're stuck with, I wouldn't say stuck, you're in your own world again. And it can be lonely because everyone was loving you and sharing it with abundance of their sadness for you and their memories of your loved one. But then at the end of the day, it's just you and the memory of that loved one that's no longer while everyone else is going on with their lives. So if it's an urn that someone can look at that's sitting on top of their entertainment center, like mine is, of course, we can talk about that one because that urn is slowly getting emptied because I don't keep her ashes in there. So she's not mine, so I share her. Or a keepsake that someone's just having a tough day, like I have mine, and I can just hold on to it and have that feeling of closeness, however that feels for me. So yeah, that's what Remember Me Always does, is we help within the moment necessities when remembering a loved one that has passed.
That's such a gift. That's such a gift to those families. I know that we lost a young one in our family in the last 5 years, and that was a hard moment. And I know for my family member, it was for her daughter. It was something that having a necklace with the ashes or something like that would have meant a lot to her. And the expenses of everything was unexpected for sure. So I think that's beautiful.
Eventually, I want to be able to provide a grant where it covers those costs or partner up with some of the funeral homes that I have talked with. But again, it always takes donations and sponsorships for those things to happen. So just because there's a nonprofit doesn't always mean there's monies right then and there, right?
Yes.
There's a lot behind the scenes. Yes. So that's always encouraged. If anyone that's listening has a heart that they want to share financial towards someone that would need it, find one that works for you or that you feel either touches your life or could touch and help someone else. Because we never know when we're going to need it, right?
Yeah, it's so true. That's so true. So I would love to hear a little bit about your daughter and what you walked through that's inspired there's so many different things in your life, from the podcast to Remember Me Always. I would love to hear about your story, Christine. What changed in your life in 2007?
So I may cry a little bit in this
That's
because
okay.
this is never going to be easy, ever.
Yeah.
And without getting into great detail, what changed my life was on New Year's Day, 2007. My family, which we have gone our own ways since, were in a rollover accident at the California sand dunes, and my 17-year-old daughter, Nicole, was ejected from the vehicle. And I let people know that I also was in that vehicle. My whole family was in that vehicle, along with my son and my daughter's best friend, because we were the family that everyone wanted to go hang out with. We were the one that were like, oh, they're going on a trip. Can I go too? And we always did. Or I was the house where everyone's like, oh, they've got a pool. Let's go over there and spend the whole summer. And you're like, don't you have a home to go to?
Love those moments.
I never, and I know you're a mom, so you understand when the kids come over. I never grew up with that. I didn't have that ability. So I was trying to change the memories for my kids, being a better parent and being a better friend and allowing them to be kids, because we're kids for a very short time in our life.
True.
And
So
a lot of times we're hearing, don't do this. You can't do that. Stop this, stop that. It's like, no, let me be a kid. And that's what I did. Now, everyone who knows me, family related, knows that I was the cool mom, but I was also the mom. There were boundaries and there were rules. But to go back on what changed my life was that's the winter break for all of our kids, right? And just to add a little bit to that, my son, who's now 26, his birthday is December 30th. Our accident happened December 31st, and my daughter passed away on January 1st. And so when I look at my calendar, I have a different kind of calendar, and I'm not comparing it to others, but this is my calendar of my new norm. I celebrate at the end of a calendar year, being December, the birth of my son and the celebration of his birthday. And New Year's Day, while everyone is celebrating a new year and resolutions and what they're going to do differently, I'm again celebrating another type of life, which is my daughter's entire life of the 17 years. Never, ever did I think my life would be changed so dramatically, emotionally, financially, stability, you name it, I got hit. And the first few years, I didn't do so well. I didn't know anyone who lost a child. And a lot of people say, oh, it's got to be so difficult. I can't imagine. Well, for your listeners, when you say I can't imagine to anybody, what I have learned is that they don't know what else to say because they're not in that situation. They don't know what they would do. And yet that's my new norm, or that's someone who's I can't imagine situation is their new norm. So it's not about getting sympathy. It's about understanding that we all have something that happens different to us. Out of those years, I grew, made mistakes, didn't make great choices. But that's part of the growing as a person, right?
Yeah.
So in Nicole's memory, I decided rather than feel sorry for myself or get in trouble, I realized that I needed to celebrate her. Instead of being on that day of in between my children's lives to feel sad or angry or all the different emotions that anyone would go through, knowing that is their new norm and they have no control over it. You can't call them up and say, come back, right?
Yeah.
You can't. We can run away, but running away, we usually can come back. But when you die, you don't get to come back. So I found a different way, founding Remember Me Always based on my personal financial situation at that time. And then my Stories of Hope came about because I became an inspiration to other people, not knowing it. But I will tell you, it was difficult for a while because I kept hearing people say, Christine, you really should let your daughter rest. If I can stress this, don't ever tell anyone that. They're resting. That individual is very much resting. It's we who are alive and surviving that change that are not resting because we're dealing with the emotions I'd mentioned early on. So through my walk, the Stories of Hope podcast and Remember Me Always was founded because it was more of a, how can I help other people get through a situation I had no one to go to? And how can I also celebrate life in its entirety by also celebrating death, right?
Yeah, that's, what a choice to make. Like you said, there was a choice in that of choosing to stay in the grief, right? And make decisions out of that, or choosing to do something that would help others. And I just love your heart for that. That's beautiful that how long did it take you after Nicole's passing to come to the point where you were ready to step into that? Because I can imagine it wasn't quick, was it?
No, there are stages of grief that everyone is aware of, but unless you're actually going through grief, you don't understand what those are. So when someone loses a loved one right away, they always come to me and I'm like, I really appreciate you thinking of me to try and help your friend or your family member. But unfortunately, that is not something someone's going to jump into and say, hey, I know someone who's lost a loved one. Here, they're going to help you. It doesn't work that way. As much as it sounds so welcoming, it doesn't work that way. There, unfortunately, are these stages you have to go through. And so for me, it wasn't right away. I lost a lot of things and I walked away from a lifestyle that I had built with my children's dad. But it also brought me to a realization about life too, and not to live it so fast. because it comes fast if you allow it. So for me, Nicole passed away on New Year's Day, 2007. We are now at 2021. She's been gone for 14 years, but it will always, always feel like it was yesterday. That memory will never, ever fade. So for me, to answer your question, I would honestly say it didn't take me until the last, 5 to 7 years, because I had to actually accept it and realize that, again, you can't come back. But what can you do to honor the legacy that she is, as you and I are building our legacies for other people to remember us for, right?
Yeah, exactly. We could think, well, gosh, I just can't get there. So I really appreciate you sharing that it did take some years to go through those different stages of grief. But I think that gives us hope that, there can be a moment, where we can turn this for good if that's where God leads us to. So I think that's a beautiful example of going through all of the stages. And then when you were ready, you were able to step out and do all that you're doing right now, but it wasn't overnight. And that's important.
And thank you for saying the exact phrase, when you are ready. I say that all the time. It's not what someone else thinks you should be doing. Oh, you should be over this by now. No, please never tell anybody that ever, that they should already be over it. It doesn't work that way. It's however that person is feeling. And I've made this new mantra of my own. Maybe it's not a mantra. My own saying is, my time, my terms. And I use that. I use that personally and professionally, because it truly is my time. I have to go through this, whether it's the stages of grief or the stages of life. And sometimes that's just meeting other people for them to see, like I've already shared, I'm an inspiration. People seeing that I still have sadness. Don't get me wrong. I have sadness, but I don't allow it to consume me, to not enjoy the gift that I was given of life before I was actually a mom. I still have that right. Did I live for my children once they were born? I did, but I also have to live for myself too.
That's so important.
It is. It's on your time. Don't let anyone tell anybody, family or otherwise, tell you, you should already be over this. Or, let them rest. No, please don't say that. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah. Can I ask, what did you need to hear in those years following Nicole's death? What did you need to hear? What are some helpful things that we can say to people if we, find ourselves a friend to someone or a family member to someone who's had a loss? I love what you've said not to say, because hearing you say that, I'm like, oh yeah, we should never say that. But I'll bet it's fallen off of my lips on accident before too. What do you need to hear in those moments?
I got to run away, actually, because I came to a breaking point where I said, I can't be everything to everybody else anymore. I forgot who I was. I know that, like you said, we say things without realizing what we're saying, because it's our intention, a good intention. I want to let people know that there is an etiquette that I would hope that they would understand, that you tell people not what they want to hear, but let them know you're there. So if you're offering to lend a shoulder, which I do all the time, offer a shoulder or an ear, I am dedicated to providing that, because I know, with me not knowing a single person who lost a child, I needed somebody to just not fix the situation, not to wipe my tears, but to hear me just speak. And then I felt that I got it off my mind or off my chest, and that I could actually process it now that it was out there into the universe. But if you offer someone that you're going to be there for them, please make sure that you are able to do that. I've learned, when I said that, people were like always calling or messaging me. I'm like, okay, I think I put too much out there. But now I've rephrased it, and hopefully this will help other people, is I am here as best as I can for you. That way it doesn't limit you to 100%, but when you can, you will be there. And as long as someone knows you're there, that's all we need, is just someone to say, hey, I'm here for you, however I can.
It sounds like just holding space, holding that space and giving an ear. and that there's really no way to fix it, even through the most encouraging of words or Bible passages, or there's really not a way to fix it. Just being there and loving them sounds like that is the most helpful.
I'm going to mention too, because I've done this in my podcast and surprised people and didn't realize it. So I'm going to share this with you. Your podcast is faith-based. Now, we both know that not everybody has a belief in God.
Yeah.
So what I say to people is, you don't have to have God in your life. I hope that you do have it, or you find that. I've seen it happen recently. Actually, I'm super excited about some people that just found that when they were in a very dark tunnel. But whatever it is that keeps you safe and happy and hopeful, then believe in that.
Yeah. And that hope piece is so important, isn't it? That hope pulls us into an anticipation for tomorrow, into something, an expectation that's coming, versus maybe what we're currently feeling.
Absolutely.
And so out of this came birth stories of hope. And tell us a little bit about it. It didn't start originally as a podcast. You pivoted amazing during COVID. Tell us a little bit about your journey with Stories of Hope.
So in 2015, when I ran away from home, I left the big city here of Phoenix, and I went to a little town called Cornville. There's no corn there, by the way. It's a town that's in between Sedona, if you live in Arizona, or even if you're listening somewhere and you know where Sedona is. It's a little town between Cottonwood and Sedona. And a friend of mine was having a difficult time in his life, being that he had been on a tour in the Navy a few times. And I was having a tough time. So God, I guess, made it one of those, let's help one another. So I helped take care of his little ranch. We've been friends for 23 years, strictly friends, love him like a big brother. And I got my peace there because then I realized the value of the animals and the tranquility of getting away from the chaos. So one day I just woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, I'm going to do what? You know, it was that kind of thing. And it was put in my heart, you're going to ask total strangers their stories. And I'm like, yeah, people don't like to be talked to when you're a total stranger, let alone tell you their personal journey of life, right?
And then share it with the world.
So share it with the world and not be, as we've already mentioned before, be judged or shamed or embarrassed or whatever you want to put the label on it. And I was like, okay, not sure where that voice is coming from, but noted. So I actually I jumped onto Facebook and I reserved which is now still currently going. I named it, This Is My Story, What's Yours, was the page. And then life happened and I didn't go back to it. And I just kept going on with life. And then I moved back because that was the plan apparently God had for me, which has turned out great, by the way, to come back to the Phoenix, but now Chandler area, which is the east side of the valley. And in 2018, I was sitting on a curb in front of the house I was living in. And again, I felt like this nudge or push on a block wall that said, you need to do this. And I'm like, oh, there's that voice again. And I'm like, now what? And, again, it was, you need to talk to people and share their story. You have seen many times people say, I don't know how you do it, Christine. So now you need to find out how people do what they're doing. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. So I called up a good friend of mine who is now a city councilwoman for the city of Chandler. Her name is Christine Ellis. I'll give a little shout out to her. Great person, great friend. And I knew that she was on this station called HSBN because she has her own show called Holy Spirit. And she had asked me to be a guest at one point. I was like, okay, sure, no problem. Don't know what I'm doing, but sure, I'll share my story. So I told her what I was doing. She's like, you know what? I need you to talk to so-and-so because I think you'd be a great addition. I was like, okay. So I became an addition to the HSBN family. Now, mind you, it's one thing when you take selfies or you're in a picture with other people. But when you're in front of a live, this one, when you're in front of a live camera and all of a sudden you're talking to the world, you're like, what am I doing?
Sort of hits home, doesn't it? It's real.
but that's where it began as far as taking action, not just being a space that's, labeled on Facebook, but it became now in action. And I love that team. And then, so I learned the backside of it, learned how to talk in front of a camera. And I'm still nervous at times, my heart beating out of my chest, my hands sweatier than anything. But my first show was about loss. How else do you introduce yourself than sharing your own story?
Mm-hmm.
So my panel was myself, a lady who had lost her son to suicide, a lady who lost her son to altitude sickness. And yeah, there's so many things I've learned. And then the other one was a gentleman who speaks professionally, and he lost his son to an overtired college student who hit his son while they stood there on the side of the road because they had stopped. And the person had been studying for their exams a lot longer than the body and the mind were able to, and they were exhausted if they ran into the vehicle when the child was on the outside of the vehicle. Mm. So we all have something in our lives. So I never compare mine to anybody's. I'm always grateful to hear someone else's, and I'll keep my story because I can keep control over it, I suppose.
Yeah.
But the 2020 year came into place. And so as everyone got a reset put on their lives, right?
Yes.
And my friend Christine, again, was one of those gals I could call up, and I said, hey, so I lost my job at the nonprofit I was working for, but it was no surprise because almost everybody lost their jobs wherever they were working, right? So it wasn't a shameful admittance. And I said, now I have this other heavy nudge, and now I don't know what I'm going to do because now we can't go to the studio, right? And she says, why don't you turn it into a podcast? I said, is that a vegetable? What is that? I always have to find humor. And so she's like, well, you can't go see the people anymore. Because I used to actually go face to face with people as well as them come into the studio, but that completely came to an absolute halt. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, no problem. So at 5:00 in the morning, I was awoken by that voice again that said, this is what you're going to do. And I'm like, oh man, I don't know what I'm doing. April 1st is exactly the day. And that's not an April Fool's joke. That's the day I pulled my laptop up and said, how do you do a podcast? And so the rest is history because I've gone 1 year now with some great support, listeners, and guests such as yourself, sharing my story, but sharing other people's stories because I want to help, heal, inspire. And my big word is to give hope.
And you really do that, Christine. I'm a huge fan of your podcast, and you really do that. You help, you inspire. To hear other people's stories, I think normalizes a lot of things in our own lives. I think you mentioned comparison. I'm not going to compare myself. I love your strength in that because I think that is a trap, right? That we can fall into, and we can compare our vacations, our homes, our clean houses, our bank accounts, right?
Right.
And we can also compare our tragedies. We can also compare the hard things that we've been through. And what I love about your show is that it really does inspire hope. It really does help. As we hear these different stories from different people, we realize in that moment, like, it's not a comparing thing. It's this is part of the human experience.
Yes.
Right. The highs, the lows, it's all part of the human experience. And I think there's so much to be learned through that. And you also highlight nonprofits. And as a nonprofit founder, I am so appreciative of that because to have a champion out there is amazing. Yeah. What kinds of things have you learned by having nonprofits? Has there been anything that surprised you? Like, wow, there's a nonprofit for this, or anything that's just surprised you as you've learned?
Well, because I have a nonprofit and it was founded based on my story, I was like, I'm not the only one who's got these. So crazy enough, when I had to figure out this whole podcast thing, my first interview, which I was super excited, rolling cartwheels, the whole 9 yards, was Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Oh, no way. Wow. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Mm-hmm. And every one of them, whether they were small, just getting started, or large, like the one I just mentioned to you, there's a story behind them all. And there's a mission that each of them are trying to achieve. And that is why I do that. So it's not just personal stories. As you now mentioned, I also do the interviewing of nonprofit organizations because they're doing the same thing like me. They have a mission to help and give hope.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And now you mentioned to me that you are starting a new endeavor that's going to be launched. Tell us a little bit about that.
Are you talking about the book or
Rise Up?
Rise Up Women Who Lead Building Legacies. So you never think you have a book to be written, right? But we all are walking books. It's just a matter of whether you want your life to be put into words for other people to read, to understand they're not alone, which is my mission too in my podcast. So this one came about because I was a judge unexpectedly, my first time being a judge, a great experience for the Woman of Achievement pageant that's out of California. They couldn't do anything because of the pandemic, so they brought it to Scottsdale, Arizona, and I got to meet some fabulous, fabulous people. One of the ladies that was in there, when they did the bio on us, an introduction, she came to me and she says, "Oh my gosh, I want to talk to you." And it was put on her heart, a woman of God, that said, "I want you to have Christine as one of your co-authors in this book called Rise Up, Women Who Lead Building Legacy." Awesome. So I'm working on that one right now. And you know, the hardest thing is putting your life into words.
Right.
It's easy to talk. Sometimes not always the right way with the intent, but it is difficult. She's like, "Oh, do the bio." And I'm like, and that's the one thing I ask all my guests. Could you give me a little information about who you are so I know how to introduce you? Now I'm like, this is actually going to be 1,200 words. What am I going to write?
You're introducing yourself. Yes.
Yes. So that's my newest, and that will be launched at the end of May. And the ladies that are going to be in this book have some amazing stories as well. And I don't know who all they are, but I know that if this gal was given this on her heart to make sure that we women share our stories, then it's a great book to pick up. I mean, I'll let that be known when that comes about, if anyone's interested in getting a copy or knowing more about who's in the book.
Let me know as well. I'd love to push it out to our audience as well.
That'd be great.
Christine, you are just an inspiration of hope. You really are. I know hope is your word, but you really are in so many ways. I've been following just your journey and fun things. And friends, I will tell you, Christine is so real. She is real and just very transparent and amazing. So I'm so thankful to have you sharing and to connect our guests with your podcast and all of the neat things that you have going on in the community, and now an upcoming book that you're going to be co-authoring. That's going to be so exciting.
It is. And you use the word connecting. We really are connected in some way, shape, or form, as Oprah has mentioned, and other people. If you know you have a mentor, follow that mentor. But we all really are connected in some way, shape, or form. And one of the several greatest things I have gotten to experience, even just recently, is some of my guests who have heard someone else's story. They're now connected together because they thought they were the only ones. And until someone said, "Oh my gosh, Christine, how do I talk to this person? Because that's where I'm at. And I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing because I feel alone." And I know that a lot of people can relate to feeling alone.
Yes.
And we can feel alone. And it's not saying it's wrong. It's at that moment. And I always tell people, don't let sadness take over you. It's a temporary setback for you to grow. And that includes connecting with people who are going through something they think that they're the only one.
That's beautiful. So if we were to listen to a particular episode of your podcast and really just feel called to that person, would we email you or go through the show notes? How would we connect with that person? Because I love that. I love the normalizing the experiences that we've had in our lives.
That would actually be both. Okay. The answer is both. I always ask my guests if they're interested in sharing information, and should someone want to reach out after hearing their story, they provide that information, and it's also in the show notes. Or yes, you can actually email me as well. And that information I can either give to you right now, or it's something that you provide in your show notes. I'm not sure.
Perfect. Go ahead. And I was going to ask you that next right now, Christine. So as people are listening and thinking, this is an amazing woman, I'd love to connect with her podcast or connect with her nonprofit, Remember Me Always. How can we do that? Give us all the ways to connect with Christine.
So I'm working on my website right now when it comes to my stories of hope. But to reach me out for stories of hope, whether they want to be a guest or they want to hear the stories, they can be found on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And my email address, you can connect with me, is stories@ChristineHotchkiss.com. And then my nonprofit is Remember Me Always. And that information, you can connect with me at info@remembermealways.com. .org. So it's info@remembermealways.org. And you actually can find that website for that one, Remember Me Always. So there you have it.
Wonderful. Oh, I'm so glad. I look forward to just all that God is doing in your life over the coming months and years, and all of the ways that just you're inspiring. You're a really inspiring lady. And so I'm so thankful to call you friend and
Oh,
to be a little part of, to have kind of our lives interweaving the way that they have has been really fun.
I love connecting, and community is definitely one. We need to connect more as community, and we need to learn to love more. Not just, you hear everyone say self-love, but we need to love one another, because when you look at people walking, I had someone tell me this the other day, you don't look like you've lost anybody. I know that wasn't something that was to sound silly, but I was thinking in my mind, what does a person look like when they lost a loved one?
Right.
So my point is, never assume that just because someone is dressed, nice, or has a nice car, or doesn't have a nice anything in their life to your perception, or they appear a certain way, that they don't have something going on. Some people disguise it very well. And some people don't want anyone to know because they don't know where else to go to. So we can all learn from one another for sure.
That is so true. That is so true. And I think so much, you've given so many just mic drop moments of different quotes to help us as we encounter someone who's lost a loved one, or if we ourselves have. So I just really appreciate your strength and encouragement in each of those. And I am holding on to my time, my terms.
You are very welcome to it.
I love that. I love that. I'm like, I love that as much. And I am here for you as best as I can. That is beautiful too.
It doesn't make you fully obligated, but it allows you to say, I am here for you. I can't do everything, but I will do as best as I can. That works for both of us. I actually sat down with a lady not too long ago, and she had also lost her daughter. And so we were comparing the notes on the questions and the things that people either ask of us of our loved ones, or the things they say, not realizing that they have a good intention, but they didn't say the right thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to find some other people to collaborate and maybe put a book together on the etiquette, if it helps, or put something out there on social media, since that's where our references are quicker than going and purchasing a book and sitting down to it, because our lives seem to be so busy if we allow it to be. But an etiquette that allows people to say, I really care. I don't always say the right things. Like, oh, you have another kid? It's like, okay, let's fix this. Let's fix this so that we can all still be around people and not lose people, because you do lose people because they don't know what to do or to say.
Yeah. That's so true. And that window where everybody's there, and then there's that window where people aren't there.
Absolutely.
Christine, as we conclude our time today, what would you say to a mama who's walked or is walking in your shoes? Whether it's been 15 years ago, 20 years ago, or whether it's been a week ago, what would you say to a mom who has recently lost a child?
It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to cry, to remember that loved one. Use their life to keep your heart comforted. We as human beings want the tangible things. We want to see it. We believe it. I want someone to know that you're not alone. And that loved one is, yes, we hear the cliche, they're always with you. Well, of course they are. You see their pictures, or you have their urn, or you go to their graveside, or whatever you do to stay connected to that person. And when you do remember that person, you do it on your terms. There's my thing again, right? My time, my terms.
Love it.
It's yours to own. And that there's going to come a time you're going to have to never let go. There's no such thing as letting go. People say that too. It's an acceptance. It's an acceptance that this is my new norm. What can I do that won't make it so hurtful? And how can I celebrate this person that was so important to me when they were walking earth, but now they're walking, and now they're an angel, and they're now a memory in a picture or a movie video, if you still have VHS or whatever your means of being able to go back in time to remember that memory, because these are memories that have been forever captured in time. They cannot be taken from you. So celebrate life in its entirety, and it's okay to not be okay, but don't stay there.
Thank you for that wisdom, Christine. Thank you so much. That's very very equipping. I feel like that's the word that's coming to my mind, is very equipping for all of us to hear that. Thank you. Thank you.
Of course.
Well, as Christine said, you can reach her at stories@christinehotchkiss.com. You can find her on Facebook and on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts at Stories of Hope. And I know that you will be blessed by all of her projects as well. So, Christine, thank you so much for coming on today. And I look forward to the next time we get to collaborate and work together.
We are. I already talked about that prior to the show. And I want to say thank you for having me. This is a total switch, but it was really nice because I don't get to share my story as much as someone who's lost a loved one that want to, because we do walk alone with our stories. And I will add that you're doing a great job. So you did a great interview with me. So I appreciate you.
I told you she was a cheerleader. Thank you, Christine.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I pray you found hope in today's conversation and maybe even feel a little less alone in your story. Stay connected with us on Facebook and Instagram at Reclaimed Story. Want to learn more about living a reclaimed life and how you can be a part of our growing community of reclaimers? Check out our website at reclaimedstory.com. All of those links and more will be in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this inspirational podcast, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. That is a huge help in helping us reach more people to live the reclaimed life. Thank you so much for listening.